Okay, so what I've got here is I'm going to go ahead and write an offer in zip forms. Now I've already gone ahead and loaded zip forms, and I'm in the transactions. So these are various transactions I've got going on right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say I'm going to create a new transaction. So what I'm doing is I'm writing an offer on a particular listing. So this is the listing I'm going to go right on, 8315 Entrecken Way. You saw I had copied the MLS number. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to name this one. This is 8315 Entrecken. So I'm going to do that. It's a purchase, and I'm going to be right. It's a residential property. And what I'm going to do, normally what I would do is I'm going to apply a template. Now you're going to have to create a template. You see I have all these different templates. This is my purchase agreement template. So I would apply that, and it would put in the forms that I want to use automatically. But I'm going to not include that now so you can see what I'm doing here. So I'm going to say save. And we're going to see one pop up over here. We saw it as, I'm going to go back and show you that. In transactions, now I've got 8315 over here. So I'm going to open it up. And you saw that it opened up this window for us automatically. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a cover sheet. And this assumes that I might be using a listing agreement, which is incorrect. But I am going to want to use a residential purchase agreement. So I'm going to include that in here for this. What other things could we be using in a purchase template? Well, let's see. We could want to include maybe the FHA VA amendatory clause if we're going to use VA financing on this thing. And the way we would get that is I can go up here in the search field and I can type in VA, and right down here it's going to have the amendatory clause, so I can add that in here. But right now all we're going to do, I'm going to go ahead and open up the cover sheet. Then the first thing that I want to do is I want to go into this zip forms. In fact, let me do this here real quick. Let me open up this little program that I got, this little gizmo. That's going to highlight my cursor. So this is the first time I've used this, so let's see how this works. I'm going to go into the zip form MLS, and I'm going to put in the MLS number of that particular listing. I'm going to say find it. It's looking it up. And I'm going to import it. And it's going to give me this cautionary thing that's going to say, are you sure you want to do it? I'm going to say yes. And now it says the MLS data has all been imported successfully. So I'm going to say OK. Okay, so now you can see in here, it's giving me the listing. It's giving me the MLS number, the address, all this stuff, parcel number, what it's listed at. It's also put in here the listing broker information. Now, in my templates that I use, it's already got all this stuff completed. You know, my selling broker firm name. In this case, it's Keller Williams Realty. Oops. Realty. Let me move that out of the way. Got to spell it right. And our address is, in this case, let me see if I have it already saved. I've already used it, so there it is. And the BRE number for our office is 018 something. There it is right there. So that one there. Now these are all dropping down because I've already used all these. I'm not going to show you now how to complete all this. I think you can figure out how to fill in the city, the state, and the zip and all that stuff. And I'll do another one here real quick where I'll show you how to complete a template. Lender information, go ahead and leave this blank right now, in my opinion. Appraiser, title, etc., pest control. We don't know who all these people are just yet. This is all open for negotiation. So right now, by the way, you'll see down here, it showed me the Homeowners Association. This is pulling out of the MLS. So I'm going to I can either save this and then go back. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back, and you'll see it saved it. I don't know if you saw that up here or not. I've got this thing in my way for the point of focus. Now I'm going to open the RPA, the Residential Purchase Agreement. Okay. And now what I'm looking at here, disclosure regarding real estate agency relationship. Okay. So I'm representing the buyer, and let's say there's two buyers. So I'm going to click 2. And oh, I'm sorry. Let me go back one. I'm going to go back, and you're going to see it right up here, saving changes. I'm going to go in the cover sheet, and I'm going to come up here. Come on. Okay, there we go. And I'm going to put in Bob Buyer, and his email address is bob@buyer.com. That's not his real address, by the way. That was a joke. Okay. Buyer number 2 is Betty Buyer, and her email address is betty@buyer.com. And then I can fill in all their street address. I can fill all this stuff in if I want. That's fine. But really the minimum is their name and their email address, because that's going to get populated. So again, I could hit save, or I could just hit back, and it's going to save right here, saving changes. So now when I open the RPA, now I'm in the disclosure. Now watch what happens. Okay. You'll see it has their names filled in down here. You see that? Bob Buyer, Betty Buyer. It has Keller Williams Realty filled in, and it doesn't have my information yet because I didn't fill that in the cover sheet. And this is somebody else that I had already done a transaction with a long time ago. So I'm going to fill in Paul Williams. It's got the BRE already filled in for Keller Williams Realty, so that's correct. I'm not going to fill in the date just yet. You know how to do the agency, and this is just all the garbage that they have to read. Possible representation of more than one buyer or seller. Let me explain that here real quick. What that means is very obvious. This is a Coldwell Bank, I think it was a Coldwell Banker listing. So in this case, we now have a buyer that's being represented by Keller Williams Realty and a seller being represented by Coldwell Banker. So how does this apply? A possible representation of more than one buyer or seller. So the first one that's apparent is, what if I have another buyer that's also interested in writing on this particular property? Well, if I have that buyer, then clearly I have more than one buyer is being represented in the possible purchase of this property. The other way that it's possible is, what if somebody else in my office is also writing an offer? That would also be the potential for another buyer, possible representation sorry, on this house. So there's a possible representation of more than one buyer on this particular house. Okay, I hope that was clear. So now here it's automatically filled this information in. It's filled everything in. Oh, so this is listed by Janice Lawless Christ. That's why it popped that up earlier. Okay, she's the listing agent. So now I'm going to keep scrolling down. This is the wire fraud advisory. It automatically fills in the address. Again, you see this is automatically all filled in. That's because I put it on that cover sheet. So now I'm going to get into the RPA, and I'm going to go down. I'm going to click today's date. Oh, let me go to full screen. Full screen, you see what that does, and it puts me back to that first page, the seller representation. I'm going to scroll down to the RPA, and now it has all the pertinent information already filled in. So they are asking $1,275,000 on this property. So let's say I'm going to write an offer for $1,275,000. I'm going to put that in, and what I'm doing is I'm hitting tab. So now it's either going to close in or on this particular date. So let's say it's 30 days from today. So I'm writing this offer on the 25th, so 35 days would be Friday. That would be great. The problem is what if they accept it 2 weeks from now? Then I'm obligating myself to a 2-week escrow. So I may or I may not want to do that. So what I might do is, instead of doing that, I might come over here and say, I need a 30-day transaction. So now if they accept it tomorrow, I have a problem, because I can't close escrow on a Saturday. Remember when we did this, we saw 30 days from today is Friday. So if they accept it in 30 days, so it will automatically roll over into the next Monday. It's just something to keep in mind. The difference between escrow shall occur on one particular date or in 30 days. So here, we'll move down to the agency. Coldwell Banker is representing the seller exclusively. Keller Williams Realty is representing the buyer exclusively. Okay, so now I'm going to go down here. Initial deposit. This is $1,275,000. What's considered normal or typical or acceptable is somewhere between 1 and 3% of the purchase price as the earnest deposit. Anything over 3% is automatically returned back to the seller in any kind of a dispute. And I'm going to exit out of this here real quick, because this keeps popping something up telling me I have to register it. So I don't know if you can see that or not. So between 1 and 3%. So let's just, because I'm not very good at math, $1,275,000. Let's say my client is willing to put in as a deposit $12,750, $127,000. That's going to be too much. Let's say they're going to, $12,750 as their earnest money deposit. It's going to go in. It's going to be wired by electronic funds transfer, or you can't see that because it's, let me get over here. Okay. Buyer direct deposit. Buyer shall deliver a deposit directly to escrow by electronic funds transfer, comma. That means or cashier's check. I'm sorry, I've got a frog in my throat all of a sudden. Or personal check or other. Just leave that alone. So they're going to wire those funds in within 3 business days. Or buyer shall deposit with the agent. We don't check that. Any kind of an increased deposit, that's very unusual. That would normally be done in a counteroffer. So I'm going to leave that off here. If it was an all cash offer, I'd put it in here. So now let's say that I'm going to do 20% financing. Now they give you this, I don't know if you can see this or not, but they give you this calculator, which would be really cool if this worked the way we want it to work. If we click on that, it opens up this window, and it talks about the interest rate, loan terms, and all this stuff. None of this is really going to get included over here, so I don't know really why they do it. So if I come in here, I'm going to open up my calculator real quick, and I'm going to do $1,270,000. That didn't work. $1,275,000, and I'm going to say times 0.2. They're putting 20% down. That means $255,000 is what their down payment will be. So then what I've got to do is I've got to take $1,275,000 minus $255,000, and I come up with $1,020,000. That will be their loan amount, $1,020,000. And what we'll see here is this calculates out what the balance of purchase price will be and gives a total purchase price down here. So you have to figure out the loan amount, 80% of $1,275,000, which is our price, our offering price. Okay, so they're putting $12,750 down as an earnest money. Their loan amount is going to be $1,020,000. Their balance of the purchase price would be $242,250. Total sales price $1,275,000. Hope I made that clear. Now, is it going to be FHA, VA, seller, financing? If none of these apply, it's going to be conventional financing, so you don't have to check any of these. Assumed financing, maybe they've got a loan on there that's really pretty. It's 3% financing, and you want to have your client assume that. All right. In that case, you have to include Form AFA. Now, we're not going to get into that right now. Or other. So most of these, you're just going to leave it blank, especially on this kind of a purchase price. You're just going to leave it blank. It's going to be conventional financing. Second loan doesn't apply. Now, here's the question that I get all the time. This loan shall be at a fixed rate not to exceed, what do I put in here, Paul? Okay, right now, 20% down conventional financing. This is going to be a jumbo loan, so you'd want to talk to your lender. But let's say it's 4.5% financing. So if you put in here 4.5%, it's not going to exceed that because that's what your lender is telling you right now. Hey, your client's going to get 4.5%. As a listing agent, if I get this offer, this automatically gives your buyer an out if the interest rate goes to 4.6%, right? Because I've said it's not to exceed 4.5%. So how do you do this so that your client feels comfortable and the listing agent feels comfortable? One way is to leave it blank, and you just tell your buyer that you're getting 4.5%. You might want to lock your loan in real quick to make sure you're getting that. And they'll say, well, what if the interest rates jump? Well, if they jump dramatically, you're still getting obligated to buy the property. Or what you could do is you could say, look, anything over 5%, you've got the right to walk away. You can still buy the property, but this gives you an out. This is a contingency of the purchase contract. Most times these are left blank. One of the things that we used to see, and I don't even know if I can do it in here. Yeah, they can't even do it anymore. So let's just leave it at 5%. Sometimes in the old contracts, before we did all this on computers, they would be, you would get BPR, which stood for Best Prevailing Rate. If you ever see that, call myself or Gary and ask what that means. Best Prevailing Rate. What does that mean? That typically means that if you're a listing agent, you see that come through on a purchase offer. It typically means that the buyer's agent is telling the buyer, hey, we're going to get you the best prevailing rate, whatever that is, and you're going to have to stick to it. That's basically what that means. Okay. If you're going to do an adjustable rate loan, not to exceed a certain percentage, again, your lender can guide you on this. Okay. Regardless of loan type, buyers shall not pay points to exceed. You can either, put this in 1%, something like that, whatever. Again, lender can give you direction on that. You don't see too many loans with points being charged on them anymore. Second loan, we're not going to get into that. FHA, not going to get into this. But basically here it's saying is that buyer has 17 days after acceptance to deliver the form VFA or any lender required repair. So that's gonna fall into your contingency, your inspection contingency. Okay. Additional financing terms. This would be where you might say seller to pay all buyers non-recurring closing costs. What does that mean? First, it's probably easiest if we describe what a recurring closing cost is. A recurring closing cost is one that happens over and over. It recurs. What is that? Your mortgage payment is a recurring cost. Your HOA fees, your Mello-Roos, all those kinds of things are recurring closing costs. What are non-recurring closing costs? An escrow fee. It only happens once. It only happens when you go into escrow. There's one fee and that's it. It's done. So that's a non-recurring closing cost. Title fees are non-recurring costs. Points, lender's fees, all of those are non-recurring closing costs. Now, as a listing agent, if you put this in and I get this, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to counter you back. And the idea being is that when you're writing an offer, you want to write it so good that myself as the listing agent, I don't have to counter that. We can just accept it as is. That's what's called a very clean offer. I don't have to come in and clean it up. I don't have to verify what things are. I don't have to change anything. We're good with it. This thing is clean. We're going to move forward. And that's really what you want, especially in this market today where you're competing with other people. You want to try to get in the door, give them a very clean, straightforward offer. Everybody can understand it, and everybody can feel comfortable just accepting this. If you put seller to pay all buyers non-recurring closing costs, the first thing that comes to my mind, well, what is that going to run my seller? So I have to give you a counteroffer and limit that. One of the ways I can do this is to say not to exceed $20,000. What does that mean? Any other recurring costs that are over $20,000, my buyer is going to pay for it. So that's one way to make this very clean. So essentially what you're doing is you're not offering them $1,275,000. You're really offering them $1,255,000 because they're paying $20,000 in recurring costs. That's what this line is for. We're going to go ahead and just take this out. Okay. Page 2. This is all boilerplate stuff, except where we see the blanks. Verification of down payment and closing costs. Verification is attached. So this would be where you've got the pre-approval from the lender saying, look, we've verified their assets, we've verified their employment, their credit. We verified everything. We have a underwritten approval that all they need at this point moving forward is an appraisal on the property because these people have been approved for their financing. That's the absolute best loan you can have. And that's something that a couple of lenders offer. So if you have questions on that, you can ask me. But what I would recommend is you have that underwritten approval letter already done. You have it in your Dropbox, your Google Drive folder, wherever it is, saved locally. And when you send this out for signatures, you include that with it in DocuSign. And you just have the buyers initial it. And then it automatically goes over to the listing agent. And you can say verification is attached. Okay? The other way of verifying down payment and closing costs is to send them a bank statement that shows, they've got $100,000 in the bank. Make certain that when you talk to your buyer, you tell them, before you send it to me, you need to redact all of the information about the account number. I don't want account numbers. And I've had clients say to me, well, yeah, Paul, we trust you. That's not the point. If something else were to happen 6 months down the road and somebody else goes into your account, creates whatever, identity theft, whatever it is, and the police, the FBI show up at your front door and say, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, who else had access to that information? And you go, you know what? My realtor had that. You don't want that to happen. So you just tell them, you redact that information before you send it to me. I don't want it, so that if that ever happens to you, you can't put my name on the list of people that had access to that information. I do not want it. So you want to be very clear on that. So again, you could include that stuff, but make sure it's all redacted before you even get it. Best way, have the lender verify all that. They should state that in their pre-approval letter. Okay. Appraisal contingency and removal. This agreement is or is not contingent upon a written appraisal of the property. Wow. If they're paying cash, they don't need appraisal, and they don't care, then yes, you can waive the appraisal, but almost never do you waive that. You just want to have that in there for the protection of your buyer. The appraisal will happen within 17 days, or again, if you're using a lender that pre-approves their financing, the financing is all done. All we need to do is the appraisal. You can usually say, well, I'm going to go ahead and we'll get the appraisal done in 14 or 10 days. Just give yourself enough time. So if I ever change this, I might change it to 14 days, especially on a VA. Sometimes those can take a little bit longer. But I would leave this blank unless I'm really going to come in strong. Then I might drop that down to 14 days. Okay? So loan terms applications. Within 3 business days, they're going to apply for loan. They've already done that. The letter's already attached. I've already got that in here. Loan contingency is a part of this agreement. It's going to be removed within 28 days. So even if you get underwritten, pre-approval, everything's done, you could leave this in here as 21 days. If you're closing sooner, if you're closing in 18 days, you might say, well, we'll remove the loan contingency in 14. We're closing in 30. I might want to leave that in, as 21. Let me talk about that for a second. I see this all the time. As a listing agent, buyer calls me. By the way, always make sure you call the listing agent first to find out what title and escrow company they like. What is it they're looking for? What do their sellers need? Are they needing to move and close escrow as soon as possible? Do they need a longer escrow? If they want a longer escrow, you are going to offer out that you're going to close sooner and give her rent back. Why? Number 1, you get paid sooner. Number 2, planes fly into buildings in New York. It happens. Stuff happens. You want to close this escrow, make sure it's done, so that should the seller unfortunately walk out and get hit by a bus on day 32, your client already owns the house, and they've already agreed they're going to be moving out. So you're done. So you want to get this thing closed. The listing agent will understand that also. Okay? So you might talk to the listing agent. Listing agent says, well, they're going to need, 45 or 60 days. You say, well, would it be agreeable to your client if we closed in 30 and gave them a free rent back for 30 days? 9 times out of 10, that listing agent is going to tell you yes. Why? Because he also understands we need to get this thing closed. Everybody gets paid. What's the downside to that? Well, now your buyer is a landlord, and this buyer is staying behind, and you've got to do things relative to that. But most of the times you want to get it closed and then get possession after the fact somehow, some way. Rental agreement, blah, blah, blah. All those different things. We can talk about those in a minute. One of the things that I get all the time is I get buyer's agents that call me and say, these buyers are fully approved. This is awesome. These guys are just, my goodness, they could pay cash, but they just want to do financing. And then I get this loan contingency removal in 21 days. And I counter that back and say, if you're so certain of this, and your buyer is so certain of their loan contingency, I want that thing removed in 7 days. And then when they balk, I say, well, wait a minute, you just got done selling me on the idea that your guys are, slam dunk. Why are you balking at closing, giving the loan contingency removal sooner? The other thing to this is day 21 comes. They don't have loan approval. I'm talking as a listing agent now. So buyer comes in. He says he's got a 21-day loan contingency removal. He is using your typical lender that's going to take 28 days to give you a full approval. and they say, well, gosh, 21, we understand that day 21 has come, but we don't want to remove the loan contingency because we don't have full approval yet. This does not say that the loan contingency will be removed once all risk has been removed. In other words, once they have full approval, it doesn't say that. It says on day 21, this will be removed. As a listing agent, you have that argument with me. I then say, so what you really are saying is you want my seller to continue to have the risk beyond 21 days. You agree to 21, but because you don't have approval yet, you want my buyer or you want my seller to continue the risk that your guy may or may not get approved. I'm sorry, you agreed to 21 days. So what I do is I have a little reminder set that on day 17, which is 4 days before this, on day 17, it reminds me that I'm going to send them a notice to buyer to perform. So I have to do it 3 days in advance. So tomorrow, I have to send them a notice to buyer to perform, telling them you need to remove that contingency in 3 days. Oh, by the way, just reminding you, you need to remove your contingency on the loan in 3 days, or my seller may cancel. Now, what's the likelihood of that? Well, maybe I have another offer in as a backup that's $10,000 more. Would my seller be happy with that? Possibly. So what we're always looking to do is, we're always looking forward to the possibility of what may or may not happen. I'm going to prepare for the worst, but hope for the best. So that's why I send out the NBP on 3 days, in this case 18 days in this. Okay, so I hope that makes some sense. Loan contingency, they're paying cash, there's no loan, you're going to check this. Or if they're fully approved, underwritten, all that stuff, you may or may not choose to check this. There's some risk in that. What if your client goes out and buys a yacht, 3 weeks into the escrow? He goes out and spends a bunch of money, or he goes out and buys a brand new SUV or some crazy thing, and when the lender comes back and verifies everything, all of a sudden they go, wait a minute, hold the phone. This guy's just obligated himself to another $150,000 because he went out and bought a brand new Tesla. That's a problem. So to protect your client, I almost never check the no loan contingency. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip to just the ones where I can fill these out. Okay. Sale of buyer's property agreement is contingent upon the buyer's property selling. So again, I've got my client's house in escrow. It's closing in 3 weeks, and now I'm writing an offer that's contingent upon the sale of their property. That's going to be a form COP. Okay. Again, unless they can buy this property without the proceeds from that sale of that house, their current home, you have to check this. Okay. Backup offers, septic wells, short sales, all these different things, the addendums, the court confirmation, that very, very seldom do we see these. Buyer and seller advisories, probate, trust, short sale, buyer's inspection is automatically checked. SBSA, I'm going to check that, and you're going to see it's now going to add that to my forms. Statewide buyer and seller advisory was added because I've checked this. It's automatically going to put that in there, so that's a really cool thing. Other terms, what else might they put in here? Seller to pay buyer's agents boat payment for 3 years. No, you're not going to put that in there. But this would be anything else that you might want to, I'm being silly. This would be anything else that you might want to, anything else that's pertinent, any other terms. You have to check with your lender. So for example, let's use the previous example. Seller to rent back property, oh boy, property for 3 years after COE. Okay, that's going to be a problem with your lender, because now what we're doing is the buyer is really buying this as an investment property, your lender is going to see this and kick this thing to the curb. He's not going to do this loan. He's going to insist that they do more down payment. So again, if there's anything you're going to put in here that might affect the financing, check with your lender first. Okay. Buyer or seller shall pay for a natural hazard zone disclosure report. Typically, the seller pays for that. You can include, by the way, let me show this here to you. It's including the tax, and it has a comma here. You can't really see it. Environmental or other. I don't even know what other we might have. It has select your service providers or drop down. You can pick one of these, or you can put in your own. You can also put in here, oops, buyer's choice. That's usually what I have, buyer's choice. Seller pay for the the following report. And here I'm going to put in, let me see if I've got it saved. I don't. I'm going to put pest control, and I think this is right, and organisms. Is that the word I'm looking for? Oh, termite. I'm sorry. Termite and pest control. Pest. And I can't remember what I have in here. I'm sorry. I'll give you the verbiage when I get to it a little bit later. It's basically the termite. It's a termite and pest organisms report. So this is just the report, the inspection. The seller is going to pay for this, okay? And I could say report here, but that's redundant because we're saying the following report. So termite and pest organisms, okay? Anything else that you might want to put in, you can check these. You don't have to do anything there. You can leave them blank. Government requirements and retrofits. Seller shall pay for those. Seller shall pay the cost of any mandatory government inspection. Seller shall pay for the cost of compliance with mandatory government retrofits. All right, blah, blah, blah. You can read through that. Seller is going to pay for that. Escrow and title. Typically what happens, both the buyer and the seller will either split 50-50, each paying their customary costs. You can put that in there. Usually I just say split 50-50 or each to pay their own. You'll see both of these. They're just about equal. When are they not, Paul? Well, let's say that the buyer, your buyer, is overseas and he needs to have a whole bunch of things wired to him, mailed to him, overnighted to him, notary fees, blah, 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 and he's going to run up all these extra costs. That might be each to pay their own. But in most cases, you just say split 50-50. Buyer lives here, seller lives here, escrow's right around the corner, everything's normal. Just split it 50-50, that's fine. I've heard from escrow companies sometimes if they have to do a delineation of each their own kind of a thing, that can be cost prohibitive. So I just put 50-50. As a listing agent, if I get this, I'm fine with either one. Really doesn't matter. Now, escrow holder shall be, you can put in the name of your escrow company. Right now, usually what's pretty customary, so few houses on the market, so many buyers looking for them. What I'll do is I'll just go seller's choice. Or if I have one that I like KDSD&I, I'll put that in here. But really, typically I just do, okay, that point's going to be seller's choice. Seller shall within 5 days sign and return escrow holder's general provisions. So that's fine. Leave that blank. Now, buyer, let's look at this. Buyer shall pay for any title insurance insuring buyer's lender. There are two title policies that are issued. One protects the lender and one protects the buyer. So in case there's a title issue, two title insurance policies are issued. Nobody pays for their own in Southern California. So the buyer is paying for the lender, that means that the seller must be paying for the buyer's title policy. This is blank. I'm going to leave that way. Title issued by, if you have a preferable title company, you can drop them in here and put them in, or you can just put in this case, seller's choice in today's market. Okay. Again, you're trying to make this as clean as possible. Now, let's talk about who gets to pick title and escrow companies. By law, that is between the principals, not the agents. The reality is you say to your buyer, who do you want to use for title and escrow? They go, I don't know. Who do you have? Who do you like? Who do you know? Same thing with the seller. So typically the sellers and the buyers, they don't know anybody. Occasionally you get one where the buyer says, yeah, my sister works for an escrow company. I'd like to use, okay. You might put that in there. The seller can counter that out. The seller might say, I don't want to use your relative's escrow company. I want to pick a different one. That's open for discussion, okay? If you want, you can just leave it up to them and you say, hey, listing agent, I'm giving it to you. I'm letting the seller choose. Okay. Here we just took everything as seller. Seller shall pay for all these things, any HOA fees, city transfer tax, county transfer tax, any private transfer tax. These are a lot of Scripps Ranch will have these kinds of things. They don't call them Melrose, but they might have a private transfer tax. Forest Ranch, Del Sur have these. And then you might want to stipulate what that is, 0.5% or whatever. A lot of times you'll see these in the MLS, where in the MLS it will say buyer to pay the private transfer tax fee of 0.5%. So you might choose buyer in that instance and then spell out what that is. Okay, but most times you're just going to pick seller. Here it has some blanks. Buyer shall pay for blah, blah, blah. In this case, I'm going to go back up here and I'm going to reference termite and pest organisms. And I'm going to drop down here and I'm going to say the seller shall pay for termite and pest organisms section 1 clearance. And I might even add in with primary recommendation. What does that mean? A lot of times the termite company will come in and they'll call for tenting. And the seller says, oh my gosh, this is going to cost me $2,000. I don't want to do that. And they call the termite company. The termite company comes back and says, well, we might be able to spot treat that for $500. And the seller says, do I get a section 1 clearance? They say, yeah, you will, but it's not the primary recommendation. That's why we say with a primary recommendation. If their primary recommendation is to tent it, Mr. Seller, you're going to tent it. That's what they're recommending. That's what we're going to do. Now, sometimes you'll get blowback from a listing agent, especially if they've already done a termite report, and they know that it's going to cost $12,000 to clear a termite. They might counter that back, but I like to put that in there. Okay, that comes from the office from legal. That's a good thing to put in there. Okay, buyer or seller. Again, this is up to you. Typically, the seller will pay for a home warranty plan. Depending on the size of the house, this one's probably going to be a lot more expensive. I might say $800 for a standard. I might want an upgraded 1-year home warranty issued by, and they want you to select your service provider, and they're going to give you these drop downs. I might just come in here and say buyer's choice. I do not say seller's choice because the seller is going to pick the cheapest one. I want my buyer to pick it, so I'm just going to leave it at that. This home probably has air conditioning, so I'm going to say air conditioning. I don't know if it has a pool or spa, but I might include that. Any of these that you include, this price is going to go up. So you want to go out and check with your service provider on that. See what that's going to cost. Make sure you're within this. If not, you're probably going to be the one picking up the difference. If it's a $1,000 plan and you only capped it at 800, your buyer's going to be looking at you and going, well, why did you only put 800? And you're going, oh crap. Okay, I'll throw in 200. Buyer waives the right, waives the purchase of a home warranty plan. Nothing in this paragraph precludes buyers purchasing. So if you don't want to ask the seller for it and you don't want to obligate your buyer for it, you can check this one. Okay, see how that cleared that out? Okay. The buyer is choosing to pay for their own home warranty, and they may or they may not get one. They haven't decided yet. Pick one of these two. You almost never want to have the buyer decide that later. Just tell them to buy it. Again, buyer or seller, depending on how strong you want your offer to be. Okay. Items included in sale. You can read all through this. All stoves, except, let's say there's one in the upstairs bedroom. They've got somebody doing that, but whatever. It's out in the garage, so you'd say except the one in the garage. Same thing, all refrigerators, except, well, a lot of times people have a second refrigerator out in the garage. You may or may not want that one. You may, just leave it in there and let that come out in the wash. Speaking of wash, all washers and dryers except, same thing. So I'm going to check those. The following additional items. Again, let's say you go into the MLS, you talk to the listing agent, and they say, yeah, the drapes up in the master bedroom, they match the master bedroom, the things on the whatever they are on the bed, the bed skirts or whatever, right? You might put that in here to say, hey, we're respecting that. You guys want to keep that. The listing agent says, yeah, the chandelier in the dining room, that's their grandmother's. They want to take that with them. This is where I would enter this in, okay? So I might say chandelier in dining room, okay? Again, this makes it a very clean offer, so the listing agent doesn't have to come back and give you a counteroffer just on this one item. Because if they're going to counteroffer on this one item, that gives them an opportunity to say, well, why don't we increase the price? Why don't we change it? Again, you want to write a clean offer, okay? Existing integrated phone, home automation systems, blah, blah, blah. These are included unless they're not. Usually they are. Leased or lien items, there's nothing to fill out here, okay? Seller represents that all items included in the purchase price are owned by seller and shall be transferred free and clear. So again, let's say that you talk to the listing agent. They say, by the way, the security system is leased. You say, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna add that in here. Again, I don't want a counteroffer, so I'm gonna list it here. Items excluded from sale. Now, let's talk about real property versus personal property. The test used to be that if you needed a tool to remove it from the house, it was considered real property. So let's look at curtains. You have curtain rod with curtains hanging from it. The curtain rod has always been considered real property, but the curtains may not be. If they can just reach up there and take off the curtain rod and slide off the drapes, that could be construed potentially as personal property. The car in the garage, that's clearly personal property. So that would be, something that you would say, oh, I want to include the car. And that would be items included in the sale. The following items additional. Okay, by the way, I did this wrong. The following additional items are included in the sale. The following additional items. So this, I'm going to strike this out, and I'm going to put that down here. This is excluded from the sale, the chandelier in the dining room. Here, personal property, items included, Mercedes-Benz. Mercedes-Benz in the garage, okay? Benz Gullwing, okay? That I'm putting in the personal property. That's why they're including the refrigerators, the washers and dryers. These would be considered personal property. Any other personal property, that's where you're going to include it here. Okay? I messed up a little bit on that. I apologize. This is items excluded from the sale. This will be the chandelier in the dining room. We're going to exclude that. We talked to the listing agent. We agree. Brackets too. This is for the, you have a TV mounted on the wall. You got a big 70-inch plasma screen, rounded, curved, beautiful, blah, blah, blah. Seller's planning on taking that with him. What's he going to do with the bracket behind there? Okay. So the brackets attached to the walls, those are either going to remain with the property or they're going to be removed and the holes or other damage shall be repaired, not painted. Again, it's a minor thing, but these are the things that always cause problems. So just be very specific of what you're doing. Buyer intends or does not intend to occupy the property. So if they're buying it as their primary residence, you leave that unchecked. Seller occupied, possession shall be delivered to the buyer at 6 p.m. or blah, 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 but at 6 p.m. on the date of close of escrow. That's normal. Sometimes you might come in here and say no more than 2 days. So we're going to close escrow on Friday, and they're going to vacate on Sunday at 6 p.m. That's when the buyer gets possession. Most of the time, you're just going to leave all this stuff blank. Okay? Or you could have a specific date in here. Seller shall remain in possession after close of escrow. If it's going to be more than 30 days, you have to do the seller in possession agreement or the RLAS for more than 30 days. If it's less than 30, you're going to do the SIP. Again, those are, and if I click on this, it's going to add that in here. So that's kind of cool. Now, let's talk about that for a second. Do you really want to get bogged down in your purchase agreement negotiating what the rent back's going to be for 5 days or 10 days or whatever? Yes and no. These are the things that can create major headaches. So the idea is, let's get that hammered out ahead of time. When you talk to the listing agent, you call him and he says, well, we're going to close escrow, but my seller needs to stay there for another 5 days until they close escrow on their new house. So we want to close on this date, get our cash, and then we're going to close on our new house in 3 days, but we're going to need 5 days to stay behind and rent the property back. Put it in the SIP, and you're going to give it back to him for free, or you're going to pay him a per diem or whatever. Preferably do this now, get it aligned up front so everybody's clear now rather than waiting till later. Okay. Tenant occupied, this is a whole other thing. Tenant needs to get out of there 5 days before the closing, or the tenant to remain in possession. This would really only be if you have an investor buying this property. Otherwise, forget about it. Just don't even do it. Too many headaches. So this is all what we call boilerplate. You can read through all of that stuff. Condominium plan development disclosures, leave that alone. You got 7 days. Unless you're closing real fast, that's fine. They're going to have to disclose whether it's a condominium, PUD. Rancho Bernardo has a lot of planned unit developments where they plan the whole thing out. It's not really a condominium. So talk to your title rep about exactly what that is, or I can explain that further. I'm not going to go into it here. If it's a condominium, seller has 3 days after acceptance request from the HOA. They have to pay a lot of money to get those. It takes them a while, but they have to, within 3 days, ask for that. Condition of property. What this is that the property is going to be basically in the same condition as when you guys wrote your offer. Buyer is strongly advised to conduct investigations of the entire property. Physical inspection report. They're going to come in. Those guys are almost standard. You have them do that. At that point, that physical inspector might say, hey, looks like there might be a problem with the roof. Looks like there might be a problem with plumbing. Looks like there might be a problem with electrical, etc., etc. We're going to recommend that a licensed electrician, licensed roofer, licensed plumber, whatever, comes in and looks at it further. But where you're going to start is with a physical inspection. And they will call out other things that you might want to further investigate. Okay? This talks about how they are going to, investigate the property. It's on them to do it. They're going to indemnify against the seller for protection. In other words, if they go in and get hurt, They're telling the seller, we're not going to sue you because you're allowing us, access to the property. Title investing, basically, how are they going to take title? They're going to figure that out in escrow. Later on, they're going to, how do they want to take title? You let them talk to the title officer, the escrow officer, get that worked out. You don't give them any advice on it. You just say, hey, look, you're going to be able to figure this out. Time period, seller, and this is a typical 30 days. Seller has 7 days after acceptance to deliver the buyer all the reports that they might have, disclosures, yada, 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 transfer disclosure statement, seller property questionnaire, the SPQ. They're going to give you those. If they were previously in escrow and they have a physical inspection report and a plumber report, electrician report, whatever, they're going to give you all that within 7 days. The buyer has 17 days to do their inspections, their due diligence. And should the seller on day 15 give you a new hey, we forgot to give you this, we had a plumber come in and he told us that we got all the plumbing's shot. But once they give that to you, that starts the time clock over again. All right. Your buyer then has 5 days right here. Buyer has 5 days after delivery of any such items, whichever is later between the time specified in paragraph 14b up here. So using our example, day 15, they drop this report on you. That does not mean in 2 days they have to remove their contingencies. They've got 5 days after that has been dropped. Okay? Hope that's clear. If you have any questions, ask me. Access to property. The buyer shall have access to property, conduct investigations for 17 days. Removal of contingencies. You almost never do this. This is with the offer. Hey, we're satisfied. This might be a case where you've got an investor. He's coming in paying cash. He's done his due diligence. He knows what he's in for. He's giving you cash. He's going to close in 5 days. He's done. Boom. Removal contingencies. We're moving forward. Very seldom you're going to do that. Oh yeah, remember I talked about the notice to seller or buyer to perform. I had said 3 days. That's incorrect. So on day 21, if they haven't released their loan contingency, on day 19, I'm sending them out a notice to buyer to perform. You can read through all this, close of escrow. I have a neighborhood cat coming over and saying, I don't know if you can hear him or not. Okay. This is where, let's say that the buyer or the seller, the other side isn't doing what they said they're going to do. They're not removing their contingencies. They're not doing X, Y, or Z. You can give them a demand to close escrow form. That's form DCE. And you're telling them, look, you're going to close in 3 days, or we might go and cancel you out. Effective cancellation on deposits. You should read all of this. Final verification of conditions. This is the final walkthrough. 5 days before closing, your buyer has an opportunity to go back and make sure all repairs were done the way that they liked. Everything looks copacetic. The seller didn't go around and kick a whole bunch of holes in the walls, etc., etc. The most important thing about this is that this is not a condition of closing. Okay? This is not a contingency of the sale. In other words, they can't say, hey, they kicked a hole in the wall, therefore we're not going to close. That's not how this works. What this does is it gives them an opportunity to go in and notate that so that if they need to go to court, they have that as proof. But they still have to move and close the escrow. Okay? Repairs should be, again, you're going to read all this stuff. Let's see. Joint escrow instructions. This is just saying general provisions. Escrow holder, buyer and seller will execute additional instruction documents provided by escrow holder that are reasonably necessary to close the escrow. Within 3 days, shall pay to escrow holder HOA other fees. Basically, that's saying if there's something else that comes across the table that you guys need to sign, you're going to do that within 3. You're going to get it done. You can't sit around and just wait on it. You have to get that done in 3 days. Copy of this agreement included shall be delivered to escrow holder within 3 days after acceptance or on a particular date. You just leave that blank. Okay. This is all boilerplate, nothing else to fill out here. I'm going to just keep scrolling. Expiration of offer, typical is 3 business days. 5 p.m. on the third day after this offer is signed by buyer. Okay. What I do fill in here is I'll say that by Paul Williams. What does that mean? Okay. What that means is in order for this offer to be accepted, you're giving them an offer. Seller has to sign it. That's not acceptance yet. Conveyance must be made back to the buyer, or in this case, to me. All right. Once I receive it, that's considered acceptance. Now, they also want us to verify later on, the acceptance of this offer. We're going to do that, but this is legally binding once I get it. And what you want to do is when you get that, you call your buyer, and the first thing you say when they say hello, you say, congratulations, you got the house. Because now you are then conveying to the buyer that acceptance. You don't have small talk and give them an opportunity to say, we changed our mind. You tell them immediately, you've got it accepted. Congratulations, you got it. That's acceptance. All right. Now, they have 17 days to do their due diligence and contingencies and all that stuff. And the contract is really slanted towards allowing the buyer to walk away, but that's a whole other discussion. Okay. One or more buyers is selling this agreement as a representative capacity. So let's say they're buying it in, as a LLC or something like that. That's what this is for. Seldom you'll find that. Acceptance of offer. This is, what I was basically talking about. If checked, seller's acceptance is subject to attached counter offer. So this would be, you've given it to them, they're giving you a counter back, in return. They would check this box, label what date the seller counter offer was dated, and it attaches to this. Okay. This is the same thing when a more sellers signing in a representative capacity. Let's say they have it in a trust or something like that. This is where they would sign that, and then you're going to include the RCSD-S for the seller, and that will automatically be added in here. Then the seller signs here, and then this is your confirmation of acceptance. So when you get this back, with the seller having signed this, you then initial and sign it, send it back, date it, and say, yeah, we confirm that we've gotten this, and we are going to escrow. So all this stuff is filled in. Escrow holder acknowledgement. I don't even know that escrow does this anymore. Great if they do. Probably the answer is you want to have them do it. A lot of times they just kind of do that by rote. They'll just send it back to you. You get it in a couple of days. Oh yeah, this is, etc. Okay. Buyer's inspection advisor, the BIA. This again is all boilerplate, just standardized stuff. So I'm going to go back. It's going to save all of this. All right. And it's saving the changes. And now I'm back out. And remember, it added in the SBSA. The only thing I can say about this is all boilerplate again. There's nothing really to fill out here except the date. Remember to put in the date over here. This is the date that you're filling this thing out. Okay. What happens to me all the time is I go ahead and I get all this ready and I put it into DocuSign and I'm ready to send it out, and I see that I've forgotten to put in today's date on this stupid thing, and then I got to come back and it fills it in at the top of each page. You see this? So just try to remember, just drop the date in here and then go back out. Otherwise, it's all boilerplate. Okay, I think that does it. If you have any questions, as always, better call Paul. Hope this helps, and go make some money.